"You freeloading old man, you piece of scum," my wife screamed it the day I found out she had sold our beach house without telling me. I had let her handle our finances for years after the accident that took our son from us. Too grief-stricken to look closely at anything with a signature line. That night, someone knocked on the door, and standing there, soaked from the rain, was my son, missing for 5 years, alive, and whispering 4 words before I could even speak his name. Dad. It wasn't an accident. I stood in the doorway and felt the last 5 years of my life rearrange themselves in an instant. But let me start from the beginning. Thank you for being here. Before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever discovered something that made you question everything you knew about someone? Just yes or no in the comments. Your perspective might help someone else. Quick note, this story includes fictionalized elements for storytelling depth. The message is what matters most. I stood in my own living room, surrounded by 40 guests celebrating an anniversary, and felt like the most unwelcome person in the house. Marlene moved through the party with the fluid confidence of someone who controlled every detail, every hors d'oeuvre, every conversation, every bank account. At 64, she looked elegant in navy silk. Her silver hair pulled back in a way that made her look refined rather than old. She'd planned this anniversary party down to the napkin colors, never once asking what I wanted. 5 years ago, I'd sold the construction materials empire I'd built from nothing and handed her every dollar. Retirement, she'd called it. Freedom from the burden of business decisions. Now at 69, I was discovering that freedom looked a lot like irrelevance. "Wonderful party, Cliff," Robert from the neighborhood association said, clapping my shoulder. 40 years, that's an achievement. "Thank you," I said. Watching Marlene laugh with a group near the fireplace. I'd built that fireplace myself, back when this Pasadena house was new and our marriage still had something resembling warmth. I waited for a lull in conversation, then approached Marlene near the kitchen. "Marlene, could we talk for a moment? About the beach house papers you mentioned." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Not now. Clifford, we have guests." "You've been saying not now for 3 weeks." "Because it's never the right time for you to interrogate me about my work," she said, her voice dropping to a sharp whisper. "I'm managing our properties. That's what you asked me to do." How does a man become a stranger in the house he paid to build? I moved to the window, watching neighbors and old business associates fill rooms I no longer recognized. The Malibu beach house sale had been mentioned casually 2 months ago, sold to simplify our holdings, Marlene said. But I'd never seen paperwork. Never been asked to sign documents. Never received an accounting of where the money went. Every time I asked, she had a reason to postpone the conversation. Martin Chen, my former supplier, cornered me by the bar. "Retirement treating you well?" "It's an adjustment," I said. "Marlene mentioned you're simplifying the real estate portfolio. Smart move at your age." I felt my jaw tighten. "She mentioned that. Did she?" "Said you're both looking forward to less responsibility." Martin smiled, oblivious to the fact that I had no idea what properties we supposedly still owned. I found Marlene again near the dining table, this time with 3 couples from her book club, listening to her describe our latest property transaction. She was explaining the tax advantages of a trust structure I'd never heard of. "Marlene," I said, keeping my voice level, "I need 5 minutes just to understand the beach house sale." The room went quiet. Not the entire party, not yet, but the small group around us stopped mid-conversation. Marlene's expression shifted from polite to cold in an instant. "Are you serious right now?" "I just want to see the paperwork for our property." "Our property." Her voice rose, carrying across the room. "You mean my job, managing the money, while you sit around like a pensioner? You handed me every responsibility 5 years ago because you couldn't handle it." I felt the party's attention shift toward us like a physical force. Conversations died. Glasses stopped clinking. "I built the company that generated that money. I said quietly. I'm not asking for much, just transparency. Transparency. From the man who retired at 64 and left me to handle everything. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're a freeloader in your own house, Clifford. You contribute nothing, question everything, and now you want to embarrass me in front of our friends. The silence in the room was absolute. Forgot people watched my wife dismantle me in the home I'd designed with my own hands. Built with profits from a business I'd grown for 4 decades. I'd spent 40 years learning which building materials decay from the inside, but I'd missed the rot in my own marriage. I think we should discuss this privately, I managed. No. Marlene's voice was ice. You want answers in front of everyone? Here's your answer. I manage our assets because you proved you can't. You sold your company, handed me the money, and now you second-guess every decision I make to preserve what's left of our wealth. If you want a full accounting, hire a lawyer. Otherwise, stop treating me like your employee. She turned and walked upstairs without another word. The room remained frozen, guests staring at their drinks, at the floor, anywhere but at me. The exodus started within minutes. Polite murmurs, forced hugs, awkward promises to get together soon. Wonderful party. Cliff, we should go. Thank you for coming. Get some rest, old friend. These things blow over. By 9 o'clock. I stood alone in the living room. Marlene hadn't come back downstairs. Rain had started hitting the windows in sheets. I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, my hands shaking enough to make the bottle clink against the glass. The rain against the windows sounded like the applause I'd never receive in this house again. I sat in the armchair I'd reupholstered myself 3 years ago and stared at the fireplace mantel. Our wedding photo sat there, 2 people I barely recognized anymore. Why had a simple request to see paperwork for our own beach house triggered such rage? The question circled in my mind, gaining weight with each pass. What was Marlene hiding? The knock at the front door cut through the storm, urgent, insistent, impossible to ignore. I glanced at the clock, 9:30. Who would be out in weather like this? I set down my glass and walked to the door, already annoyed at whatever neighbor had forgotten something at the party. But when I opened the door, the rain pouring down in the darkness behind him, I saw a face I hadn't seen in 5 years. A face I'd thought I might never see again. My son stood on my doorstep, soaking wet, with scars I didn't recognize and terror in his eyes. The man standing in the rain looked like a ghost version of my son, thinner, scarred, with eyes that had learned to check shadows before speaking. Dad, it's me. Please, I need to come inside before someone sees. I grabbed his arm and pulled him through the doorway. Rain soaking into my carpet. Sterling Harlan, 32 years old, stood dripping in my entryway, with a surgical scar running down his left forearm, and terror written across a face I'd last seen 5 years ago at a hospital, the night I'd been told he might not survive the construction accident. The accident that had stolen my son and left me with nothing but questions and grief. Sterling. My voice cracked. My God. Everyone said you were... We thought the accident... The accident wasn't an accident. He glanced past me toward the stairs, toward where Marlene was sleeping. That's what I need to tell you. I locked the front door with shaking hands. My son. Alive. After 5 years of searching, hiring investigators, blaming myself for whatever had driven him away. 5 years of Marlene telling me to let it go, to accept that Sterling had chosen to disappear, that some people just couldn't handle the pressure of expectations. Are you hurt? Do you need a doctor? I need you to listen. Sterling's voice was barely above a whisper. And I need somewhere we can talk where she won't hear us. She? You mean your mother? Especially her. I led him to my home office, a small room at the back of the house that I'd soundproofed years ago, when I used to take late-night business calls. I locked the door behind us and turned on the desk lamp. In the warm light, Sterling looked older than 32. Lean. Weathered. With lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and constant vigilance. 5 years of grief. And my son had been alive the entire time, alive and running. Start from the beginning, I said, handing him a towel from the closet. The crane collapse at the Riverside site, February 2020. You remember? You were in a coma for 6 days. Fractured skull, crushed hip. The doctors said you were lucky to survive. Lucky. Sterling's laugh was bitter. Dad, that equipment had been inspected 3 days before. Safety certification current. The brake mechanism that failed it. It didn't fail. It was cut. Then welded to look intact. I sank into my desk chair. What are you saying? Someone sabotaged that crane. Someone who knew I'd be operating it that morning. He pulled off his wet jacket, revealing more scars I didn't recognize. 3 days after I woke up in the hospital, a man visited me. Said his name was Wayne. He told me I had 2 choices. Disappear and never tell anyone what I suspected, or my family would have a series of unfortunate accidents. You should have called the police, called me. He knew Mom's name. Dad. He called her while standing in my hospital room. I heard him say, "It's done, Marlene. The kid understands." The room seemed to tilt. I'd spent 40 years reading stress fractures and steel beams, but I'd never learned to read the fractures in my own family. That's impossible, I said. Your mother grieved for you. She cried for weeks. She hired private investigators. Did she? Sterling's eyes held mine. Or did she tell you she hired investigators? Did you ever see the invoices, talk to them directly? I opened my mouth to answer, then realized I couldn't. Marlene had handled everything. She'd told me it was too painful for me to be involved, that she'd managed the search efforts. Just like she'd managed every financial decision since I'd sold the business. Just like she'd managed to explode at me tonight for asking to see paperwork about the beach house. Why would she? I couldn't finish the sentence. Why would a mother conspire to hurt her own son? I don't know, Sterling said. That's why I stayed away. I've been living in Nevada under a different name, working construction jobs for cash. I documented everything I could about that accident, photos, the welded brake mechanism I kept from the wreckage, medical records. I've been waiting for the right moment to come back. What changed? 2 weeks ago. I heard she was selling properties, moving assets. I have a friend who still lives in Pasadena. He told me Mom's been liquidating real estate at rates that don't make sense. The beach house went for $300,000 under market value. My hands went cold. How do you know that? Because I've been watching from a distance. And tonight when I saw all those cars leaving your party, I knew something had happened. I couldn't stay away anymore. I stood up and paced to the window, looking out at rain-soaked darkness. My son was alive. My wife had possibly been lying to me for 5 years. The woman I'd trusted with millions from my life's work might have conspired to harm our child. You can't tell Mom I'm here, Sterling said. Promise me you won't tell her. Sterling, she's your mother. She grieved for you. Did she? Or did she perform grief? His voice hardened. Dad, I need you to think clearly. The accident that nearly killed me wasn't random. The man who threatened me knew her name. She's been moving assets fast enough to trigger my surveillance. And tonight, you told me she exploded when you asked about property sales. Does any of that sound like grief? How do you choose between the son standing before you and the wife sleeping upstairs? I don't know what to believe, I said finally. Sterling reached into his jacket and pulled out a waterproof envelope. Then don't believe me yet, but take this. It's everything I've gathered, photos from the construction site, medical records, documentation of Mom's property sales. Look at it when you're ready. But please, his voice broke. Don't tell her I'm here. Until you've decided who you trust more, me standing here, or what Mom told you for 5 years. I took the envelope. It felt heavy, weighted with implications I wasn't ready to consider. Upstairs. I heard Marlene's bedroom door open. Sterling's eyes went wide, his body tensing like prey sensing a predator. In that moment, watching my son's terror at the sound of his mother's footsteps, I understood that whatever was in this envelope would destroy everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The question was whether I had the courage to open it. I had 3 minutes to hide the evidence before Marlene came downstairs, the wet towel in the guest bathroom, the second coffee mug, the muddy footprints Sterling had tracked through the kitchen. I'd gotten Sterling out through the back door at dawn, watching him disappear into pre-sunrise darkness. The envelope he'd given me sat locked in my office desk, unopened. I hadn't had the courage yet. Now I moved through the house like a man defusing a bomb. The wet towel, I grabbed it, then froze. The hamper was in our master bathroom. The laundry room was next to the kitchen, where Marlene would see me. I stuffed it behind paint cans in the garage. The coffee mug in the sink. 2 mugs. When I lived alone in this house for all practical purposes. I washed one quickly, but the dish rack held the other, still damp. Marlene would notice. She noticed everything. Footprints. Mud tracked from the front door through the hallway. I grabbed paper towels, scrubbing at the hard wood, but the moisture had settled into the grain. Clifford, Marlene's voice from the stairs made me drop the paper towels. I stood too fast, my back protesting. "Just cleaning up from the party," I called. She descended slowly, wearing the silk robe I'd bought her for Christmas. In the morning light, she looked elegant and remote. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep." She moved past me toward the kitchen, and I held my breath. Would she notice the damp spots on the floor? The missing towel? "Why is there a wet towel on the guest bathroom counter?" she called. My heart hammered. I'd missed one. I couldn't sleep. Took a shower. Must have forgotten where I left it. Marlene appeared in the doorway, holding the towel. "You never use that bathroom. I didn't want to wake you." She set the towel down with precise care, then opened the cabinet where we kept coffee mugs. Her hand paused. When she turned, her expression had shifted from curious to cold. "There's a mug missing. The blue one from the set your mother gave us." 40 years of structural engineering hadn't taught me anything about building a convincing lie. The foundation kept showing through. "I broke it," I said. "Last night, after everyone left." "You broke it?" "Yes." My careful husband, who's never broken a dish in 40 years, broke a mug last night without mentioning it. I said nothing. Every word dug the hole deeper. Marlene crossed to the sink, running one finger along the dish rack. "This one's still wet. You just washed it. So either you broke a mug and washed another at 6 in the morning, or someone else was here." "Don't be ridiculous." "Don't lie to me. Clifford, I can always tell when you're lying. Who was here last night?" "No one was." "After the party. After I went to bed. I heard voices downstairs. Muffled, but voices." Her eyes searched my face. "Who was in our house?" How do you deceive someone who's memorized every expression on your face for 4 decades? "You were exhausted," I said. "You probably heard me on the phone. I called Robert, talked about the party." "At midnight, in the rain. I was upset about what you said. In front of everyone." That landed. Something flickered across her face, acknowledgement. She'd humiliated me publicly. For a moment. I thought the deflection might work. Then she walked to the hallway and pointed at the floor. "These are footprints. Fresh mud. Not from the party I cleaned after everyone left. These are from later, and they're not your shoe size." I looked at the faint marks I'd tried to clean. She was right. Sterling wore a size 11. I wore a 9. "I went outside," I said. "After the rain. Needed air." In shoes 3 sizes too big. The walls were closing in. Every answer created 2 new questions. Every lie collapsed under 40 years of honesty between us. I'd never hidden anything from Marlene. My face was an open book she'd been reading since 1985. Maybe they're from the caterers, I tried. They tracked mud earlier. Stop. Her voice cut like a blade. Just stop. The silence between them had weight now, like the moment before a building realizes its foundation has failed. Marlene moved closer, studying me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, fear. She was afraid of something, and that fear made her dangerous. Last night, she said quietly, when I heard voices, I came to the top of the stairs. I saw you go into your office. I saw you lock the door. You never locked that door. Clifford. Not in 40 years. My mouth went dry. I stood there for 20 minutes, listening. I heard 2 voices, yours and someone else's, a man's voice, young, familiar. She knew. Somehow she knew. Then I heard the back door open around 5 this morning. I watched from the bedroom window. I saw someone leave. I couldn't see his face in the dark, but I saw his shape, his walk. Her hands were shaking now, gripping the counter. His limp. Sterling had a limp. From the accident, from the crane that had crushed his hip. Marlene stood in the kitchen doorway blocking my exit, her eyes moving from the coffee mugs to my face and back again. You're hiding something from me, she said, voice dropping to barely above a whisper. And I need to know, is it him? The question hung in the air between us. Heavy with 5 years of lies I was only beginning to understand. She wasn't asking if I'd had a visitor. She was asking if her son she'd told me to stop searching for, to accept was gone, had come home. And the fact that she had to ask, the fact that her first response was fear rather than joy, told me everything Sterling had said was true. I didn't answer Marlene's question. I couldn't. Instead, I watched her face shift through emotions I couldn't read, fear, calculation, something that looked almost like resignation. Then she turned and walked upstairs without another word. 20 minutes later, she came back down, dressed for errands, her purse over her shoulder. I'm going out, she said, her voice carefully neutral. The gallery opening I mentioned. I'll be back this evening. She didn't wait for my response. The moment her car pulled out of the driveway, I was already climbing the stairs, 3 at a time, toward the locked office where my son had been hiding for 14 hours. Sterling sat in my desk chair, looking exhausted and wired simultaneously. He'd found crackers in my desk drawer. The package was empty beside him. She's gone, he asked. For now. I locked the door behind me. Tell me everything, the accident, what really happened. Sterling took a breath, and I watched him mentally return to a day 5 years ago that had nearly killed him. February 2020. The Riverside commercial site. I was operating the tower crane, lifting steel beams for the 3rd floor. Standard procedure, I'd done it 100 times. His hands moved as he spoke, recreating the mechanics. The hydraulics started acting strange around noon, jerky movements, pressure inconsistencies. I reported it to the site supervisor, but he said we were behind schedule, finished the day. You should have refused. I know that now. Sterling's jaw tightened. At 2:15, I was positioning a beam when the brake system failed completely. The counterweight dropped, the jib swung free, and I was standing directly underneath when 3 tons of steel came down. I remembered that phone call. The hospital, Sterling unconscious, doctors unsure if he'd wake up. The crane operator who replaced me the next day said afterward the hydraulics had been tampered with. Dad. Someone wanted me under that crane when it dropped. Listening to your son describe the moment he nearly died is one thing. Learning someone engineered that moment is another kind of death entirely. Who would? I don't know. I spent 6 days in a coma. Broken ribs, fractured arm, concussion. When I woke up, you and Mom were there. He paused. You looked like you'd aged 10 years. Mom looked composed, like she'd been expecting me to wake up. I sat down in the chair across from him, my legs suddenly unsteady. 3 days after I woke up, a man came to my room. Late evening, after visiting hours. He said he was from the insurance company, investigating the accident. Showed me a badge that looked official. What did he want? He closed the door. Stood between me and the call button. Sterling's voice went flat, reciting facts to keep emotion at bay. He said the accident investigation had raised questions. Said there was evidence of mechanical sabotage, and investigators would want to know who had motive to hurt me. He suggested, my father, you might be under scrutiny for insurance fraud. That's insane. That's what I said. Then he leaned close and told me I had 2 choices. Sterling met my eyes. Disappear. Completely new name. New city. Never contact family again or watch you have a similar accident. He was very specific about the timeline. Said I had 24 hours to decide. And if I told anyone about this conversation, the offer was void and you'd be dead within the week. I'd spent 40 years identifying structural failures before they became catastrophic. But the failure in my own family had been catastrophic for 5 years before I'd even looked. You should have told me. We could have gone to the police. With what evidence? A threat from someone claiming to be insurance. I was drugged. Dad. Post-concussion. On pain medication. Who would believe me? He stood up, pacing. And then, in the middle of his threat, his phone rang. Sterling stopped at the window, his back to me. He answered it. I remember because it seemed so casual. He's threatening to kill my father, and he takes a phone call. He said, "Yes, Marlene, I'm handling it." Just like that. Then he told whoever was on the phone that I was being cooperative, that it would be resolved within 24 hours. The room tilted. He said her name. He said Marlene. Sterling turned to face me. Then he put the phone away and finished telling me how you'd die if I didn't disappear. My own mother was on that call. Dad. She was coordinating it. The name came through the phone while the threat was still being delivered, Marlene. Maybe it was a different Marlene. A coincidence. He described you. Described our house, mentioned the construction business you'd just sold. Sterling's voice broke. There is no coincidence big enough to explain that. Mom was on the phone while this man threatened to kill you if I didn't vanish. She was part of it. I stood up, needing to move, needing to do something with the rage and grief warring in my chest. My wife of 40 years. The woman I'd trusted with every dollar from selling my life's work. The mother of my child. Where did you go? Nevada. Reno. Changed my name. Worked construction under the table. I called Mom once a month from different burner phones to let her know I was alive and staying quiet. She never asked me to come home. Never said she missed me. Just asked if I was keeping my word. And the envelope you gave me. Photos from the construction site I took that morning. Medical records. Documentation of the crane sabotage. A record of every call I made to Mom, dates, times, burner phone numbers, everything I've gathered over 5 years. Sterling moved to the window, then froze. Dad, she's back. I looked past him to see Marlene's car turning onto our street. Hours earlier than she'd said. The gallery opening wasn't until evening. Sterling's hands were shaking. She knows I'm here. That's why she came back early. She's checking. The attic, I said. There's a crawl space behind the insulation. She never goes up there. We heard the front door open downstairs. My son looked at me, with 5 years of fear in his eyes, and I understood that we were both trapped in a house with a woman who'd orchestrated attempted murder. The only question was what she'd do now that her carefully constructed lies were collapsing. I got Sterling into the attic before Marlene made it upstairs. Heard her moving through rooms, opening doors, checking spaces with an intensity that confirmed what my son had said. She knew he was here, or at least suspected it. That evening, I found Marlene in the hallway at 11, phone pressed to her ear, whispering with an urgency I'd never heard in 40 years of marriage. "I don't care what it takes," she was saying. "Just make sure." She saw me and went silent. Her thumb hit the screen, ending the call with visible force. "I have to go," she'd said into the phone before I could fully process what I'd heard. "I'll call Yak." "Who was that?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Her face flushed not embarrassment. I realized, but the physical response to being caught. "Just an old friend, Sarah, from college. She's going through something difficult. At 11 at night. She's in crisis. Sometimes people need to talk." I watched her knuckles white from gripping the phone. Watched her breathing, shallow and quick. These weren't the signs of concern for a friend in crisis. These were signs of fear. "I didn't know you kept in touch with Sarah." "We reconnected recently." She moved past me toward our bedroom. "I'm tired, Clifford. It's been a long day." She closed the door between us with a finality that felt like punctuation on a sentence I was only beginning to understand. How many of her phone calls over 40 years had been lies I simply never thought to question? Monday morning. I told Marlene I had errands downtown. She barely looked up from her coffee, distracted by something on her phone. Whatever she was coordinating, it was absorbing all her attention. Preston Lockwood's law office occupied the 15th floor of a building I'd helped supply materials for 20 years ago. I'd always felt proud walking into this place, knowing my concrete and rebar held it up. Today, I felt like the building itself might collapse under the weight of what I'd come to discuss. Preston Lockwood, 58. Reviewed my account with the methodical precision of an attorney who had spent 3 decades ensuring real estate deals left no room for legal challenge. He'd handled the sale of my construction business 5 years ago, negotiated the deal that had generated the millions I'd handed to Marlene. Looking at him now, I wondered what he'd think if he knew where that money had actually gone. "Preston, I need your help," I said, sitting across from his mahogany desk. "My son is alive. The accident 5 years ago, it wasn't an accident." His pen stopped mid-note. "Sterling alive. He came to my house Saturday night. In the rain, terrified. Tell me everything. Don't leave out any detail, no matter how small," I told him. The crane sabotage, the hospital threat, the phone call where the stranger said Marlene's name while threatening my son. The 5 years of Sterling living under a different identity in Nevada. Marlene's increasingly suspicious behavior over property sales I'd never authorized. Preston's office felt like standing at a construction site before breaking ground. Everything still looked normal, but the demolition was already scheduled. When I finished, Preston was quiet for a long moment. Then he opened a file on his computer, fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. "The business sale netted you $3.8 million after taxes," he said. "You gave full financial power of attorney to Marlene 6 months later. Do you know what your current asset position is?" "She handles all that." "That's what I was afraid of." He turned his screen toward me. "I pulled public property records while you were talking. In the past 5 years, 4 properties registered in your name or joint ownership have been sold. The Malibu Beach House, a rental property in Riverside, a commercial lot in Glendale, and a vacation condo in Palm Springs." I stared at the list. "I only knew about the beach house, and I never saw paperwork for that." "Combined sale price for all 4 properties, $2.1 million. All transactions processed through shell companies or trusts I don't recognize from your estate planning." Preston's expression was grim. "Clifford, if your suspicions are right, and they sound right, you need to understand something. One wrong move, one hint that you're investigating, and she'll erase every piece of evidence overnight. Can't we just get a court order, file for emergency injunction?" Preston shook his head. "On what grounds?" "Right now all we have is your son's testimony about a 5-year-old threat, and he's been legally missing. No court will freeze assets based on that. We need documentation, bank records, transfer receipts, proof of fraud or conspiracy. How do I get that without her knowing? Carefully. Very carefully. Preston pulled a business card from his desk drawer. This is Diana Reed, former detective, now the best private investigator I know. She specializes in marital asset investigation. But Clifford, you need to understand the timeline we're working with. What timeline? The evidence of your wife's betrayal exists somewhere in paper and pixels for now. The words hung between us like a warning. If Marlene suspects you're investigating, she has legal authority to destroy documents, close accounts, transfer assets. She's your wife. She has power of attorney. Courts move slowly. Document destruction happens fast. He leaned forward. Once she knows you know, you have hours, maybe a day before everything disappears. My hands felt cold. What do I do? Act normal. Give her no reason to suspect. Diana will start investigating quietly public records, bank statements, property transfers. But you have to keep living with her like nothing's changed. Can you do that? I thought about Sterling hiding in an attic. About Marlene's white knuckles on that phone. About 40 years of marriage built on a foundation I'd never questioned. I don't have a choice, I said. Preston leaned forward, hands clasped on his desk. We need to move fast but carefully. Hire a licensed investigator today. Document everything. And Clifford, do not confront her. Do not ask questions. Do not let her suspect anything until we have ironclad proof. Because whatever she's been hiding for 5 years, she'll burn it all down before she lets you find it. That night, I waited until I heard Marlene's bedroom door close upstairs before I locked myself in my home office. The envelope Sterling had given me sat in my desk drawer where I'd hidden it, yellowed, sealed, preserved for 5 years like evidence he'd known someone would need. I held it under the desk lamp, battling between loyalty to my wife and Preston's warning that she was hiding something catastrophic. My hand shook as I reached for the letter opener. The crisp sound of aged adhesive crackling filled the silent office. I froze, listening. Was Marlene still asleep upstairs? Every small noise made my heart hammer. The house settling, the heater clicking on, my own breathing too loud in my ears. Inside the envelope, not one photograph, but several. And beneath them, a handwritten note on lined paper. The ink slightly faded, but unmistakably Sterling's handwriting. Dad, it began. If you're reading this, I'm either dead or gone. Someone was at the site that morning, someone who shouldn't have been there. I don't know who he is, but I saw Mom talking to him at the hospital parking lot 3 days after my accident. She didn't see me. Find out who he is. Sterling. I read it 3 times. Sterling's handwriting, I'd know it anywhere. 5 years ago he wrote this, knowing he might not survive to tell me in person. My son had suspected his own mother before he'd even left the hospital. The photograph slid out not a single photo, but 6 different prints, all showing the Riverside construction site from various angles. I spread them across my desk under the lamp. And 40 years of construction experience took over, pushing emotion aside so I could analyze what I was seeing. The first photo showed the tower crane from the east side, taken maybe an hour before the accident based on the sun position. The second showed the same crane from ground level, focusing on the hydraulic assembly. The third captured the control cabin and counterweight system. But it was the 4th, 5th, and 6th photos that made my hands go cold. In 3 different shots, taken from 3 different angles over what must have been a 30-minute span, the same man appeared. Marked jacket, average build, standing near the crane assembly. In one photo, he was talking on his phone. In another, he was crouched by the hydraulic lines. In the third, he was walking away from the equipment, hands in his pockets, like someone who'd just finished a task. I pulled my reading glasses on and examined each image more closely. That crane assembly was wrong. the counterweight positioning anyone with basic certification would see it. The hydraulic lines showed stress points that shouldn't exist on equipment that had passed inspection 3 days earlier. This wasn't an accident waiting to happen. This was engineered. I grabbed my phone and used the camera to zoom in on the stranger's face in the clearest photo. Male, maybe late 40s or early 50s in the picture, dark hair. Something familiar about the jawline, the way he stood. And then it hit me like a physical blow. The anniversary party. Late April. Just 2 weeks ago. I'd been standing by the window, watching guests fill our living room with false congratulations, when I'd noticed Marlene by the catering table talking to someone. A man I didn't recognize, but she'd introduced him briefly, dismissively as Victor Brennan, an old college friend. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time. Marlene had college friends I'd never met. But now, staring at this photo from 5 years ago, I saw the same build, the same profile. The man at my anniversary party was the same man who'd been at the construction site the day my son nearly died. I fumbled through the documents Preston had given me. The property transfer records he'd pulled, there, Riverside property purchase, dated March 2020, 1 month after Sterling's accident. Listed as co-investors Marlene Harlan and Victor Brennan. Victor Brennan. The old college friend who just happened to be at the construction site during a sabotaged crane collapse. The business partner whose name appeared on property deals I'd never authorized. The man I'd watched my wife touch familiarly at our anniversary party. Her expression unguarded in a way I hadn't consciously registered until this moment. I spread Sterling's photos across my desk in chronological order based on the sun angles and shadows. The man Victor had been there for at least 30 minutes before the accident. Long enough to tamper with equipment. Long enough to ensure the hydraulics would fail at precisely the wrong moment. Sterling's note said he'd seen Marlene talking to this man at the hospital parking lot 3 days after the accident. 3 days. While our son was still recovering from a fractured skull and crushed hip, I was sitting vigil at his bedside. Marlene had been in the parking lot coordinating with the man who'd tried to kill him. My phone buzzed, making me jump. A text from Preston. Diana Reed available tomorrow 9 a.m. Bring everything you have. I looked at the photographs spread across my desk. Evidence of sabotage, evidence of conspiracy. Evidence that my wife of 40 years had been working with a man who'd engineered our son's near death. She'd stood in our living room 2 weeks ago and introduced him to me as an old college friend, her hand on his arm. She'd smiled like they were innocent acquaintances instead of co-conspirators in attempted murder. The stranger at the construction site 5 years ago wasn't a stranger at all. He was Marlene's business partner, her co-investor, the man who appeared on property deeds for assets I'd never known were sold. And now I knew his name, Victor Brennan. Upstairs, I heard footsteps, Marlene, moving around in her bedroom. I quickly gathered the photos, slipped them back into the envelope, and locked it in my desk drawer. She'd introduced me to the man who'd tried to kill our son. Smiled while doing it. Touched his arm like an old friend instead of an accomplice. And I'd shaken his hand, made small talk. Let him walk out of my house without knowing he'd been there 5 years ago, standing next to the crane that nearly crushed Sterling. The pieces were fitting together into a picture I couldn't unsee. And the worst part was knowing I had to sit across from Marlene at breakfast tomorrow and pretend I didn't know any of it. I hadn't slept in 36 hours. But the photos spread across Preston's conference table kept me sharper than any amount of coffee could. I'd left the house before Marlene woke up. Drove straight to downtown LA with Sterling's envelope clutched in my briefcase like a grenade. Now. Watching Preston examine each photograph under the fluorescent lights, I saw his expression darken with understanding. Sterling documented this like he knew someone would need evidence, Preston said, holding up a photo showing Victor Brennan crouched near the crane's hydraulic assembly. Your son was building a case. The man in these photos, Victor Brennan. Marlene introduced him at our anniversary party as an old college friend. Preston's hand rested on one of Sterling's photos. And I saw something I'd never seen in my attorney's face before: anger. Then she's been hiding him in plain sight for 5 years. He pulled out his phone. "We need Diana Reed here, now." "The investigator you mentioned. The best I know for this kind of case. Former LAPD detective. Specialized in financial fraud and asset concealment. If anyone can trace what your wife and this Victor Brennan have been doing, it's her." He typed quickly. "She can be here in 20 minutes. I spent those 20 minutes staring at Sterling's handwriting on the note he'd left. Find out who he is. My son had trusted me to do this, and I'd spent 5 years grieving instead of investigating. Diana Reed arrived carrying a slim laptop case and the focused energy of someone who'd learned to waste no time on pleasantries. Mad 40s. Dark hair pulled back efficiently. She moved with the deliberate economy of a woman who'd spent years reading people and situations in seconds. "Mr. Harlan," she said, shaking my hand with a grip that was both professional and assessing. "Preston said you have evidence of a possible conspiracy involving your wife and an unidentified male. Let's see what you have." "Diana specializes in marital asset concealment," Preston explained. "If your wife is moving money, Diana will find the trail." "The man's not unidentified anymore," I said, spreading the photos across the table. "His name is Victor Brennan." Diana's expression shifted immediately. Not surprise, but recognition. She set down her laptop case and pulled out a slim tablet. "Victor Brennan," she repeated, her tone changing. "Spell that for me." "Brennan, because if it's the Victor Brennan I'm thinking of, this just became a much bigger case." "You know him?" "I know of him. Or at least, I know one of his names." She was already typing on her tablet. "Give me a minute." I watched her fingers move across the screen. Watched her eyes scan whatever database she was accessing. Preston stood beside me, silent but tense. Diana's fingers stopped typing mid-search. Her eyes locked on her screen. "Show me the photos again," she said. I pushed Sterling's photographs toward her. She pulled out her phone, took pictures of each one, then compared them to something on her tablet screen. "That's him," she said finally. "Older now, but that's him, Mr. Harlan. I need you to tell me everything. How do you know this man? How is he connected to your wife?" I told her. The anniversary party introduction, the property transfers Preston had discovered, Sterling's note about seeing Marlene with this man at the hospital, the construction site sabotage. Diana studied each photo with trained investigative eyes, noting timestamps in the corners, analyzing angles and positioning. When she reached Sterling's handwritten note, she photographed it carefully. "Your son took these 5 years ago, and he specifically noted seeing this man with your wife at the hospital 3 days post-accident." Sterling preserved everything, like he knew he might not be around to tell me himself. Smart kid. This is documentation, not just photos. He was building an evidence chain. She looked up at me. "Mr. Harlan, I'm going to be direct. The man in these photos, if he's who I think he is, your family is dealing with someone very dangerous. Tell me." Diana turned her tablet toward me. The screen showed a police database entry with multiple photographs, the same face from Sterling's photos, but in booking photos from different jurisdictions. Victor Brennan is one of at least 3 names he uses. The others I know of are Wayne Colton and Michael Torrance. He's been arrested twice. Once in Nevada for insurance fraud in 2008, once in Arizona for real estate scheme in 2013. Both times he got reduced sentences by cooperating against accomplices. "He's a career criminal," Preston said. "He's a career con artist," Diana corrected. "And he's good at it." The Nevada case involved a staged construction accident for insurance payout. Sound familiar? My hands went cold. How long had Marlene known what Victor really was? The Arizona case was marital asset fraud, helping a wife hide property from her husband during divorce proceedings. He served 18 months, got out in 2015, and dropped off law enforcement radar. Diana closed her tablet. Until now. What do you need from me? I asked. Give me 1 week. If your wife is selling assets fast, there will be a paper trail bank transfers, escrow accounts, title changes. I'll trace every property transaction, every financial movement. But I need you to act completely normal at home. Can you do that? I thought about going home to Marlene, sitting across from her at dinner, pretending I didn't know she'd partnered with a con artist to hurt our son. I don't have a choice, I said. What did your preliminary search show? Preston asked Diana. Besides the aliases and convictions, Diana packed up the photos carefully, handing them back to me. Enough to know this isn't amateur hour. Victor Brennan, or Wayne Colton, or whatever he's calling himself now, has at least 3 known aliases and 2 fraud convictions. Mr. Harlan, your wife didn't reconnect with an old college friend. She's in business with a career con artist. She stood, gathering her laptop case. I'll start with public records property transfers, business filings, corporate registrations. Then I'll dig into the financial trail. 1 week, Mr. Harlan. I'll have a full report. Thank you, I managed. Diana Reed turned to face me with the expression of someone who's seen this pattern before. Mr. Harlan, men like Victor Brennan don't stage construction accidents alone. They need inside help, someone with access, someone trusted. Her eyes held mine. I'll have proof in 1 week, but I can tell you right now, your wife didn't just help him steal your assets. She helped him try to kill your son. My hands shook as I turned the key in our front door. I had to remind myself that the woman inside didn't know where I'd spent the morning, with an investigator who just confirmed she'd helped a career con artist try to kill our son. I found Marlene in the kitchen, humming while she arranged fresh flowers in a vase. The domestic normalcy of it, the flowers, the apron. The smile she gave me felt obscene. You were gone all morning, she said. Everything okay? Just some business downtown, nothing important. Perfect timing. She dried her hands on a towel. I need to talk to you about something estate planning paperwork. Can you sit down for a few minutes? Diana's words were still echoing in my head. She helped him try to kill your son. Sure, I managed. Marlene led me to the dining room where papers were already spread across the table. Not a few pages, a stack of documents, professionally bound, with colored tabs marking signature lines. She'd prepared this before asking me, before knowing if I'd even be home. She spread the papers across the table like a card dealer who'd already stacked the deck. Our attorney suggested we update the house title structure, she said, her voice bright with practiced casualness. Makes everything simpler when one of us passes. I sat down slowly, pulling the documents toward me. What attorney Preston handles our estate? A tax specialist, I consulted. With property values so high now, we need to be strategic. She pointed to the first page. It's really straightforward, just transfers some administrative authority to streamline things. I started reading. 40 years in construction had taught me to read contracts carefully, to look for the language buried in subsections that changed everything. The first 3 pages were indeed standard estate planning beneficiary designations. Trust structures, nothing alarming. Then I reached page 4. This section here, I said, keeping my voice level. It authorizes you to execute sales contracts without my signature, only for efficiency. Honey. In case you're traveling or unavailable. Standard estate planning. Standard for someone planning to sell everything out from under me, I thought, but said nothing. I kept reading. There it was, buried in subsection 4.2, authorization to execute any and all sales contracts for real property. The Pasadena house we were sitting in. The last major asset Marlene hadn't already liquidated. She wanted my signature, giving her permission to sell it without me. This is a big decision, I said carefully. I'd like Preston to review it. Preston's a real estate attorney, not a tax specialist. Marlene's smile didn't waver, but something shifted in her eyes. This really is time-sensitive. Clifford, There are filing windows we need to meet. What filing windows? Tax advantages. If we don't file by Thursday, we lose the exemption for this year. Thursday. 48 hours. With Sterling gone. We need to protect what we've built, she continued, her voice softening in a way that made my skin crawl. This ensures everything stays in the family. Stays in the family, or makes it easier to liquidate? The words came out before I could stop them. Marlene's expression froze for just a second, long enough for me to see the calculation behind it. Clifford, why are you being difficult? I'm trying to help us. Are you... I pushed the papers back across the table. Because I'd like to understand exactly what I'm signing. You've sold 4 properties in 5 years without showing me a single piece of paperwork. Now you want authorization to sell our house. And I'm supposed to just trust your wife of 40 years. Yes, actually. Her voice hardened. I've managed our finances since you retired. I've handled every transaction, every investment, every decision while you've, what? Questioned me? Accused me? How many times had she practiced this performance, this concerned wife routine, before trying it on me? I'm not accusing you of anything, I said, forcing calm into my voice. I just want to understand what I'm signing. Then let me explain it. She pulled the papers back, flipping to a specific page. This trust structure protects the house value from estate taxes. When one of us dies, the other doesn't face a massive tax burden. It's prudent planning, Clifford. That's all. She was good. If I didn't know about Victor Brennan, about Sterling's photos, about the fraud convictions and aliases, I might have believed her. I want Preston to review this first, I said. Give me a few days. The filing deadline is Thursday, 48 hours. We can't miss it. Then we'll miss it. I'm not signing something this significant without my attorney reviewing. Actually, Marlene interrupted, her tone shifting to something brighter. Victor helped me organize this. He's coming by tomorrow morning to walk you through it if you have questions. You remember Victor from the party? The room seemed to tilt. Victor Brennan, he's very knowledgeable about estate planning. He suggested this whole structure, actually. He'll be here at 10 tomorrow morning. She smiled. He can explain everything better than I can. Victor Brennan. The man from Sterling's construction site photos. The career con artist with multiple aliases and fraud convictions. Coming to my house in less than 24 hours to explain why I should sign papers giving Marlene authority to sell everything I owned. I didn't realize you and Victor were working together, I said carefully. We've been friends for years. Clifford, I told you we knew each other in college. He's been helping me navigate some of these complex financial decisions. I see. So you'll meet with him tomorrow. Let him explain the details. I looked at my wife across the dining room table. At the papers she'd prepared before asking my permission. At the smile that didn't reach her eyes. At 40 years of marriage dissolving into lies, I was only beginning to understand. I'll think about it, I said. Marlene gathered the unsigned papers, her smile still perfectly in place. Thursday, Clifford. We really can't miss this deadline. I watched her walk upstairs with the documents, heard her bedroom door close. Then I sat alone in the dining room, doing the math. Victor Brennan, the man who'd sabotaged Sterling's crane, who'd threatened my son in a hospital room, who had fraud convictions under multiple aliases, would be sitting in my living room in less than 24 hours. Diana Reed's investigation wouldn't be complete for 6 more days. I had 48 hours before Marlene's fabricated deadline, and I had no idea how to stop what was already in motion. The sound of Marlene's car backing out of the driveway was still echoing when I opened the locked drawer in her desk. She'd left for her weekly yoga class, 2 hours of guaranteed absence. I'd waited until her car turned the corner before moving to her home office. The room she'd claimed 5 years ago when she'd taken over our finances. The desk was locked, but I remembered a spare key hidden behind our wedding album on the bookshelf. My hands found it on the 3rd try. The irony wasn't lost on me. The drawer slid open with a sound that felt too loud. Inside file folders, meticulously organized with dates written in Marlene's precise handwriting. I pulled out the first one. The year was marked 2020, the year of Sterling's accident. Inside were printed phone bills, pages and pages of them. Despite us being paperless for years, someone had deliberately printed and saved these bills. And not just saved them, organized them chronologically, with specific numbers highlighted in yellow. My hands were shaking as I lifted the folder from the drawer. The first bill was dated September 2019, 3 months before Sterling's accident. Marlene's phone line. Most calls were to numbers I recognized, her sister, friends, local businesses. But one number, highlighted in yellow, appeared repeatedly. Dozens of calls to the same unknown number. I flipped through more pages. October, November, December. The highlighted number appeared more frequently as months progressed. Daily calls in the weeks before Sterling's accident. Some lasting minutes, others stretching to half an hour. Then, in February 2020, the month of Sterling's accident, the highlighted calls stopped abruptly. 2 weeks of silence. The exact 2 weeks Sterling had spent in the hospital. Then they resumed. March 2020. April. May. The pattern continued, month after month, year after year. I spread the bills across Marlene's desk chronologically. The highlighted number appeared 247 times across 5 years. 247 documented calls to someone Marlene had kept secret from me. I pulled up my phone, checking dates against my memory. September 2020, a highlighted call. The weekend Marlene claimed she was visiting her sister. I'd filed the missing person report on Sterling that same weekend, alone at the police station. December 2021. A highlighted call on Christmas Day. 43 minutes. 43 minutes. On Christmas. While I cried over his empty stocking. I remembered that Christmas. I'd sat in Sterling's old room, sobbing, while Marlene made excuses about checking on dinner. She'd been on the phone for 43 minutes while I grieved our missing son in the next room. I had to set the papers down and breathe. The calls started before the accident. They stopped during Sterling's hospitalization. They resumed after he disappeared. This wasn't Marlene calling Victor to coordinate their conspiracy. This was something else. I kept checking dates. Every weekend trip Marlene had taken, every conference, every yoga retreat. The highlighted number appeared on those dates like a signature. June 2022. A call lasting over an hour. Dated the same weekend I'd hired a new private investigator. Marlene had told me I needed to let go. That spending money on investigators was unhealthy. Then she'd spent an hour on this call. March 2023. 2 calls in 1 week while I was in bed with the flu, between doses of cold medicine. She'd made 2 calls to the highlighted number, each lasting more than 20 minutes. How many times had I begged her to tell me if Sterling had contacted her? And she looked me in the eyes and said no. I reached the bottom of the folder. The most recent bill, printed just last month. My hands went completely numb. April 2025. 2 weeks before our anniversary party. A highlighted call to the same number that had appeared 246 times before. Duration 37 minutes. 2 weeks before Sterling had shown up at my door in the rain. Marlene had spent 37 minutes on the phone with someone. And a week later, Sterling had appeared at our anniversary party, standing in the shadows. She'd known he was coming home. She'd known he was alive. She'd known where he was this entire time. I pulled out my phone and photographed every page. Every highlighted call, every date, every duration. Evidence of 5 years of secret contact between Marlene and someone she'd sworn she hadn't heard from. 247 calls. 247 times she'd chosen to protect her secrets instead of ending my grief. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Locked the drawer. Returned the key behind the wedding album. Walked out with copies of evidence that would destroy whatever was left of our marriage. But one question consumed me. If Marlene had been in contact with Sterling for 5 years, keeping him hidden while I grieved, what had she been telling him? What had she promised him? And why had he finally decided to come home now? 2 weeks after that last phone call. Victor Brennan was coming tomorrow morning. Marlene had given me a 48-hour deadline to sign away the house. And now I knew she'd been coordinating with Sterling all along. But coordinating what? I looked at the photo on my phone. The most recent call, April 2025. The week before Sterling had given me the envelope that would expose Marlene's conspiracy. She'd called him right before he'd decided to give me the evidence that would destroy her. I photographed every highlighted phone bill with trembling hands, then locked the drawer exactly as I'd found it. The hidden number appeared 247 times across 5 years. 247 times Marlene had chosen to protect her conspiracy instead of ending my grief. But the most devastating call wasn't in the past. It was dated 2 weeks ago. The same week Sterling gave me the envelope that would expose her. My phone rang at 6 in the morning, dragging me from the first real sleep I'd had in days. I fumbled for it in the darkness, heart already racing. Diana Reed's voice crackled through, tight with urgency. "I found him," she said. "Wayne Colton, and it's worse than we thought." I sat up, pulse hammering. "What did you find?" "The beach house purchase first. Colton bought it through a shell company called Cascade Holdings, 3 months after Sterling's accident. Paid $890,000, at least $300,000 under market value. The seller A holding company tied to the same construction firm where Sterling died." My blood went cold. Sterling had shown me that listing a week before he died, eyes bright with plans. He bought Sterling's dream house for pennies on the dollar. But that's not all. Remember those construction site photos Sterling took? The man arguing with the foreman about safety violations? The one in the hard hat. Sterling said he looked like management. Wayne Colton. I ran facial recognition. 98% match. He was there. Clifford. At the site. Days before the accident. The room tilted. I gripped the phone harder, forcing myself to breathe. He was there. And the name. Diana continued. Wayne Colton isn't his only identity. DMV records show a legal name change filed back in March 1987. Before that, he was Victor Brennan. Victor Brennan. The name hit like a blow. I remembered that signature at the bottom of the accident report. The insurance investigator. The same man who ruled Sterling's death accidental within 48 hours. He investigated his own crime. Clifford. Signed off on his own cover-up. I stood, pacing as the pieces locked into place. The falsified safety reports, the missing OSHA complaints Sterling had filed days before he died, the rushed investigation. All orchestrated by the man who'd killed him. "There's more," Diana said, papers rustling on her end. I pulled Marlene's employment records. She's been on Colton's insurance company payroll for 6 years. Started exactly 11 months before Sterling died. The implications slammed into me. She was planted as a claims processor in their Seattle office. Low-level position, mostly remote. But the timing she started there, then met Sterling 6 weeks later at that charity auction. She was there to feed him information. My voice shook. About Sterling, about us, about the house, the insurance, everything. It fits the pattern. Colton identifies targets successful contractors with valuable properties, minimal family complications. Marlene gets close, gathers intelligence. They stage an accident. Colton investigates and buries it. Then swoops in to buy assets at distressed prices. I thought of Marlene's sudden appearance 2 years ago. The whirlwind courtship. Her insistence on joint accounts. Updated insurance policies. Getting her name on the beach house fund. She'd mapped every corner of Sterling's life. Cataloged every asset. How many others? I asked. Still digging. But I found two similar cases in Oregon. Both contractors. Both died in workplace accidents between 2019 and 2021. Both investigated by Victor Brennan. Both had properties sold below market within 6 months. And their widows disappeared after the sales closed. New names, new cities, new social security numbers. Just like Marlene's trying to do. I stared out at the dawn breaking over Seattle, painting the sky red and gold. Somewhere out there, Wayne Colton Victor Brennan thought he'd gotten away with it. Thought Sterling was just another mark. What about the phone records? I asked. The 247 calls between Marlene and that blocked number. Still working on the subpoena. But I'm betting it's Colton. The timing aligns perfectly. Sterling's policy updates, the property appraisal, the week before his death. They were coordinating every step. My hands clenched. Every conversation Marlene had with Sterling, every intimate moment, every plan they'd made, all reported back. Sterling had been living with the architect of his murder, sharing his bed with a woman counting down the days. We need hard evidence, I said, forcing my voice to stay level. Something that puts Colton at the construction site the day Sterling died. I'm pulling traffic camera footage from the area. And I have a contact at OSHA willing to look at the original investigation file. If Colton altered documents, falsified timestamps, buried witness statements, when can you get it? 72 hours. Maybe less if my OSHA contact comes through. But Clifford, you need to be careful. If Colton realizes we're onto him, he won't. I kept my voice steady. What's our next move? I need you to get into Sterling's files again. Look for anything about property appraisals, market analyses, communications with real estate agents. If Colton was planning this, Sterling might have documented something without realizing its significance. I thought of the boxes in my garage. Sterling's meticulous records spanning years. I'll start today. And Clifford, watch your back. We're not dealing with a con artist. This is organized, professional. Colton's done this before, and he's good at making problems disappear. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen as morning light filled the room. Sterling's face smiled at me from the photo on my refrigerator. Young, hopeful, building the future Colton had stolen and sold. But now I had a name, a face, a pattern, and I had something Colton didn't expect. A father who would never stop coming. I grabbed my car keys and headed for the garage. Those boxes weren't going to search themselves. And somewhere in Sterling's careful documentation was the thread that would unravel everything. Colton had made one critical mistake. He'd left me alive. It would be his last. I spent 2 hours in Sterling's boxes before Diana called. Meet me at Preston's office, she said. We have a problem. The problem was time. We need another 2 weeks minimum, Diana said, spreading files across Preston's conference table. Traffic camera footage, OSHA witness interviews, bank records linking the shell companies, it's all there. But we need ironclad proof before we move. Preston leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Which means you can't refuse to sign those house sale papers, Clifford. Not yet. I stared at him. You want me to agree to the sale? I want you to pretend to agree, Preston said. Tell Marlene you'll sign. Make her think she's won. That's how we buy the time Diana needs to finish the investigation. Could I look my wife in the eyes and lie as convincingly as she'd been lying to me for 6 years? If you refuse now, Diana added, she'll know you're investigating. Every piece of evidence disappears. Colton goes underground. We lose everything. Preston nodded. Right now. Marlene thinks you're too distracted to notice what she's doing. Keep her thinking that. Play the tired husband. Sign preliminary documents. Ask for time to review. Delay where you can. But don't tip your hand. I thought about Marlene's face that morning. All false concern. About the phone calls to Colton she thought I didn't know about. About Sterling, who'd trusted her completely. "How long do you need?" I asked Diana. 2 weeks, maybe 3. My OSHA contact is nervous. The traffic footage requires subpoenas. We're building a criminal conspiracy case. Mr. Harlan, that takes time. And if Marlene pushes for a faster closing, Preston smiled grimly. Then you develop concerns. You want your lawyer to review everything. You can't find the original deed. Your accountant has questions. You'd be amazed how many ways a motivated seller can slow down a transaction. I drove back to Pasadena rehearsing the lie. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd almost convinced myself I was a man who'd decided to simplify his life, instead of a man planning his wife's arrest. Marlene was in the kitchen, arranging fresh flowers. Yellow roses, my favorite. The staging was almost insulting. "You're home early," she said. My hand was steady as I poured coffee I didn't want, playing the role of tired husband instead of avenging father. "I talked to my accountant this morning about the house sale. You're right, the tax structure makes sense. I'll sign the papers." Marlene's hands stilled on the vase. "Really? You're sure? We're not getting any younger. Maybe it's time to simplify things." I took a sip of coffee. "I'm tired of fighting." Something shifted in her face. Shoulders dropping, smile softening. She crossed the kitchen and touched my arm. "Thank God. I was worried you'd fight me on this, like you fight everything lately." Like I fight everything. As if my grief over Sterling was just stubbornness, but I just nodded. She touched my arm like I was her partner instead of her mark, and I let her, because the best lies are sold with tenderness. "When does this need to be finalized?" I asked, moving to the table where she'd left her folder. "What's the actual timeline?" Marlene followed, pulling out papers with practiced efficiency. "The closing is scheduled for May 28th. That gives us 2.5 weeks to organize everything." 2.5 weeks. 18 days. I kept my expression neutral. "That seems fast. Don't these things usually take longer?" "The buyers are motivated, and we're paying cash." She spread documents across the dining room table. "I've already contacted an estate sale company. They can start May 26th. I picked up one of the papers, scanning it like I was reading instead of calculating how many days Diana had. "I should probably have Preston review the final documents before we sign." "Of course," Marlene said quickly. Too quickly. She pulled out her calendar, flipping to May. There, May 28th, already circled in red ink. Below it, notes in her precise handwriting. Estate sale 26th, movers 27th, closing 10 a.m. "You scheduled all this before I agreed to sign?" Marlene met my eyes, and for just a moment, I saw something cold beneath the warmth. "I was confident you'd see reason eventually. You always do." I stood in my own dining room watching my wife circle dates on a calendar, scheduling the systematic dismantling of everything I'd built. And I smiled like a man who'd been convinced instead of a man counting down to her arrest. "You've thought of everything," I said. She smiled back, genuine pleasure in her eyes. "I always do, honey." Yes, I thought. The beach house, the insurance policies, Sterling's accident, Wayne Colton's investigation, 6 years of theft masquerading as marriage. But this time, you've made one mistake. You've given me a deadline. 18 days to finish Diana's investigation, freeze the assets, and build an ironclad case before Marlene discovered I'd been lying as skillfully as she had. The clock had started ticking. Diana's surveillance van smelled like stale coffee and leather. And through the tinted windows, I watched my wife walk into a restaurant to meet her lover. She'd called me 2 hours earlier. "Marlene's leaving the house," Diana said, "dressed for what looks like a date, not a business meeting. I think you should see this." I'd driven to Santa Monica on autopilot, my mind still calculating the 18-day countdown. The van was parked across from Miramar. An upscale seafood place where Marlene and I used to celebrate anniversaries before celebrations stopped mattering.
She spent 40 minutes on hair and makeup, Diana said as I climbed into the back.
That dress, you recognize it? Through the telephoto lens monitor, I could see Marlene's reflection in the restaurant window. Navy blue silk, fitted at the waist. She wore that on our 40th anniversary. I haven't seen it since. She's meeting someone at a corner table. He's been waiting 20 minutes. Diana adjusted the lens, and Wayne Colton's face filled the screen. I'd seen his DMV photo, his construction site images, but seeing him here, in a tailored suit, waiting for my wife with a glass of wine already poured for her, that was different. How long has she been inside? I asked. 5 minutes. Watch. The camera tracked Marlene as she crossed the dining room. Wayne stood, took both her hands, kissed her cheek, but the kiss lingered too long. His hands too familiar on her waist. She leaned into him, her palm flat against his chest. That's how she used to greet me. 40 years ago, before everything became routine. The way they're sitting, Diana murmured, adjusting the zoom. Knees touching, leaning in close. That's not business partners, Mr. Harlan. My hands gripped the edge of the equipment console until my knuckles went white. They shared a bottle of wine, something expensive, judging by how long the waiter took describing it. Wayne poured for her, and Marlene laughed at something he said. Really laughed, throwing her head back, her whole face lighting up. She hasn't laughed like that in years, I heard myself say. Not with me. Diana glanced at me, sympathy in her eyes. I'm sorry you're seeing this, but you need to understand what we're dealing with. What we were dealing with was my wife touching another man's hand across a candlelit table, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on his wrist while they talked. Wayne reached across and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her neck. That gesture. I'd seen it before, in old photographs from when Marlene and I were dating. I used to do that. When had I stopped? When had she stopped looking at me with eyes that alive? Cameras recording everything, Diana said quietly. Every gesture, every touch. It's all evidence. Evidence. Right. Because this was about fraud, about Sterling's murder, about the house sale. Not about watching my wife of 40 years gaze at another man like he hung the moon. See how she knows he's reaching for the wine before he moves? Diana pointed at the screen. That's muscle memory. They've done this hundreds of times. I watched Marlene shift her water glass a half-second before Wayne's elbow would have knocked it. Watched her lean back just as the waiter approached from behind. Watched Wayne order for her without asking, and her smile of approval. I've surveilled dozens of affairs. Diana continued. This level of synchronization takes years to develop. The way they finish each other's sentences, anticipate movements. This isn't recent, Mr. Harlan. Years, I repeated. How many years has this been going on? Diana didn't answer, just kept the camera focused on the couple in the window. They ate slowly, talking constantly. Marlene gestured with her hands the way she did when she was passionate about something, animated in a way I hadn't seen in decades. Wayne listened like every word mattered, like she was the only person in the room, like I used to listen. Before I got too busy building the business, raising Sterling, maintaining the life she said she wanted, the life she was selling to finance her escape with him. After 90 minutes. Wayne stood to leave. He stopped beside Marlene's chair, and she reached up, cupping his face with her palm. He leaned into her touch, eyes closed, and the tenderness in that gesture, the practiced intimacy of it, hit me harder than any financial fraud. Got the shot, Diana said softly. That gesture that's not 6 years, Mr. Harlan. That's decades. She never touched me like that. My voice sounded hollow. Not even when we were newlyweds. Diana zoomed the lens tighter on Marlene's hand against Wayne's face. And I saw it. A thin, gold band on her middle finger that I'd never noticed before. Simple, elegant, clearly expensive.
She's wearing his ring,
Diana said quietly, capturing the shot. Same college, same years, before me. Diana turned from the monitor to face me. I need to tell you something else. I found old college records while researching Colton's background. Wayne Colton attended UCLA from 1981 to 1985. Same university as Marlene. Same years. The van's climate control hummed in the silence. They knew each other before you did. Diana continued. Before you met her at that corporate fundraiser in '85. Before you married her that same year. Wayne Colton, or Victor Brennan, or whatever his real name is, he was there first. I stared at the monitor where Marlene was gathering her purse, still smiling at something Wayne had said before he left. That smile. The real one. Not the careful one she wore at home. Mr. Harlan, Diana said. Her voice was gentler than I'd ever heard it. I don't think you're looking at a conspiracy that started 6 years ago. I think you've been the other man in your own marriage for 40 years. The manila folder Diana slid across Preston's conference table was labeled Financial Timeline Analysis, and I knew before opening it that my entire life was about to be rewritten. 2 days had passed since the surveillance footage. 2 days of going home to Marlene, sharing meals, discussing the house sale like nothing had changed. 2 days of playing the fool while knowing I'd been cast in that role 40 years ago. I've traced every financial move Marlene made for the past 6 years, Diana said, settling into the chair beside Preston. What I found isn't opportunistic fraud. It's a planned operation with a specific timeline. Preston opened the folder, his expression darkening as he scanned the first page. When did the suspicious transactions start? That's what you need to see, Diana said, turning to a page marked with red tabs. The dates aren't random. They're coordinated with key events in your life, Mr. Harlan. I pulled the folder closer. The document was organized chronologically, each entry highlighted with color-coded markers. Red for legal filings, blue for financial transfers, yellow for insurance changes. There was a lot of red. Start here. Diana pointed to an entry near the top. August 2019. Marlene filed paperwork to change the beneficiary structure on your life insurance policies. I remember signing those, I said. She said it was routine estate planning. Sterling was removed as primary beneficiary. Diana said quietly. Replaced with an irrevocable trust structure where Marlene has full control. The trust's ultimate beneficiary, buried under 3 layers of legal entities, is Wayne Colton. If you'd died, he would have gotten everything. The room went very quiet. Then Diana walked me through the rest in one breath. A month later, I sold the construction business and cleared $3.8 million after taxes, 5 years of work toward retirement. Toward time with Marlene and Sterling. 3 weeks after that, October 15th, 2019. Marlene established an irrevocable insurance trust, naming Wayne Colton as co-trustee, specifically covering construction site injury claims. She waited until you converted 40 years of work into liquid assets, Preston said. Then started the countdown. They weren't covering risk, Mr. Harlan. They were planning to create it. Sterling died 4 months later. They waited until I had cash, I heard myself say, then killed Son. The timeline supports premeditation, Preston said grimly. This wasn't opportunity. This was execution of a plan. How do you grieve a marriage that never existed? Diana pulled out another document, this one older, creased from multiple folds. I went back further. Marlene married you in June 1985. Your business was small then. What, maybe 3 employees? 4, including me, I said. We were doing residential remodels, small projects. I had potential, but we were living paycheck to paycheck. She saw the potential, Diana said. Married you when the business was worth almost nothing. Then Wayne, still Victor Brennan, then legally changed his name to Wayne Colton in March 1987. New identity, clean background check. Perfect for a career in insurance investigation. The pieces were falling into place with terrible clarity. They've been running this con for nearly 40 years, Preston said. Marlene gets close to the target, establishes the marriage, waits for the business to mature. Wayne builds a parallel career in insurance, positioning himself to investigate and cover up the eventual crime. She raised Sterling, I said, my voice hollow. Attended his school events, helped with homework, celebrated his birthdays, all while planning— I couldn't finish the sentence. Professional patience, Diana said, and there was something like respect in her voice. Respect for the scope of the con, if not the ethics. They waited decades for the optimal moment, when you had maximum liquid assets, when Sterling was in the construction business, making his death plausible, and when Wayne had established enough credibility to control the investigation. Preston was making notes, his pen moving rapidly across a legal pad. This changes our entire approach. We're not proving fraud anymore. We're proving conspiracy to commit murder. Murders, plural, Diana corrected. She pulled out the final document in her folder. Look at the beneficiary change timing again. August 2019, 1 month before your business sale. Marlene restructured your life insurance to benefit Wayne. So if Clifford died— Preston trailed off. Wayne inherits through the trust structure, Diana finished. But Clifford didn't die. He's 69 years old, healthy, probably good for another decade. So 4 months later, they pivoted. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't hold the pages anymore. Sterling's accident wasn't plan A, Diana said, and her voice was gentle now, like she was delivering a terminal diagnosis. It was plan B. The original plan was to kill you, Mr. Harlan. Make it look like an accident, collect the life insurance through the trust, and disappear. When that didn't happen, naturally, they targeted your son instead. The conference room's air conditioning hummed. Outside, traffic sounds filtered up from the street. Normal sounds from a normal world, where wives didn't spend 40 years planning their husbands' murders. We have proof, Preston said, organizing the documents. Timeline, motive, financial paper trail, surveillance footage. This is prosecutable. We also have 11 days, Diana added, checking her phone, until Marlene closes on the house sale and disappears with the proceeds. Once that money moves offshore, we'll never recover it. She turned to the final page of her report, a simple timeline chart showing 40 years compressed into one devastating arc. Mr. Harlan, I need you to understand what we're proving here. This wasn't a woman who got greedy. This was a professional con artist who married you as a long-term investment and waited until you were worth stealing from. She attempted to murder you through life insurance fraud. And when that failed, she targeted your son instead. She paused, meeting my eyes. And we have 11 days until she completes the theft. Why was everyone at the neighborhood meeting talking to me like I was made of glass? I'd attended the monthly gathering to maintain appearances while Preston prepared emergency legal filings. 11 days until the closing. 11 days to keep Marlene convinced I suspected nothing. But the moment I walked into the community center, something felt wrong. Clifford! So good to see you out. Margaret from down the street approached with exaggerated brightness. Is Marlene with you? Or are you here on your own? The question had an odd emphasis, like she was asking if I'd remembered to bring a chaperone. Just me tonight, I said. Marlene had other plans. Well, we're so glad you could make it. She patted my arm with the careful sympathy usually reserved for the bereaved. We were so sorry to hear you've been having a difficult time lately. Difficult time? I'd lost my son 5 years ago? Was she talking about that? But the careful, patronizing tone in their voices made my skin crawl. Throughout the meeting, I noticed others watching me with the same expression. Tom Henderson asked if I was keeping up with my medications. Linda Yates spoke slowly, as if I might struggle to follow normal conversation speed. I was 70, not senile. After the meeting adjourned, Robert Henley caught my elbow. Robert was 68, a former structural engineer I'd worked with for 15 years before we both retired. We'd built a dozen commercial projects together, solved problems, trusted each other's judgment. "Cliff, I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "Can we step outside?" We walked into the cool night air, away from the others filing out to their cars. "What's going on, Robert?" I asked. "Everyone in there is acting like I'm losing my mind." Robert's weathered face was troubled. That's what I need to talk to you about. It's awkward as hell, but you deserve to know." A knot formed in my stomach. "Know what?" "Marlene's been talking to people, confiding in mutual friends." He looked away, uncomfortable. "She's saying you've been showing signs of cognitive decline, forgetting conversations, making paranoid accusations, confusing dates and details." The parking lot lights hummed overhead. Traffic sounds filtered from the nearby street. "She told Carol you accused her of stealing from you," Robert continued. "Said you've been paranoid about the finances, making wild claims that don't make sense. She's painting herself as the devoted wife caring for a declining husband. She called me paranoid. To our friends, while actively stealing everything I own." "I'm not confused," I said, my voice tight. "I'm investigating her because she is stealing from me. Her and Wayne Colton. They killed Sterling. Robert, I have proof." Robert studied my face, and I saw him trying to decide if I was proving Marlene's point. "I'm not crazy," I said. "I have a private investigator. Financial forensics, surveillance footage, timeline analysis. Preston's filing criminal charges. It's all real." "Robert, she's been running a con for 40 years. 40 years, Robert repeated slowly. "She's building a public narrative of my mental incompetence." I continued. "So when I expose her, she can claim it's the delusions of a sick old man. She's preemptively destroying my credibility." Robert was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Cliff, there's something else. This whole thing, the way she's talking about you, it reminded me of something." 5 years ago, Robert said, his voice dropping. "Right before Sterling disappeared, Marlene was saying the same things about him. The world seemed to stop." "What?" "At a gathering maybe 3 weeks before Sterling vanished. I remember because it struck me as odd. Marlene was talking to a group of us, saying Sterling had been paranoid lately, making wild accusations about her, losing his grip on reality." My hands clenched. "She used the same playbook, almost word for word," Robert confirmed. "She said he was stressed from work, seeing conspiracies that didn't exist, needing help he wouldn't accept." She sounded so concerned, so frustrated. "And then he disappeared," I said. 2 weeks later. I remember thinking at the time, God. I remember thinking she must be devastated, that she'd tried to help him and he'd run away anyway. How many people had she convinced I was losing my mind? "Robert, listen to me carefully," I said. "Sterling didn't have paranoid delusions. He discovered her fraud. He found evidence connecting her to Wayne Colton. That's why she discredited him before he could expose her. And now she's doing the same thing to you," Robert said quietly. "I have 11 days before she closes on the house sale and disappears with the money. Preston's filing emergency injunctions. But if Marlene's convinced everyone I'm incompetent, no judge will take my accusation seriously." Robert gripped my shoulder, his expression grave. "Cliff, I didn't believe her about Sterling back then. I should have said something. Should have asked him if he was okay." His voice dropped. 2 weeks after Marlene told everyone he was having paranoid delusions, your son disappeared. And now she's saying the exact same things about you." The implication hung in the cold night air. Sterling hadn't just disappeared. He'd been discredited first, isolated, made to look unstable so no one would believe him when he tried to expose the truth. And now I was watching the same pattern unfold. But this time I could see it coming. "Robert, I need you to do something for me," I said. "When this goes public, when the accusations start flying, I need you to remember this conversation. Remember that I was coherent, rational, showing you evidence. Can you do that?" Robert nodded slowly. "What are you going to do?" "Whatever it takes to make sure she doesn't win. Again." I walked to my car, my mind racing. Marlene had spent weeks building her narrative. Every conversation, every concerned comment to friends, every carefully planted seed of doubt. She'd learned from experience. Sterling had tried to expose her, so she'd destroyed his credibility first. Now she was doing the same to me. But with 40 years of established marriage giving her words more weight. But this time, her targets saw the trap closing. And this time, I had 11 days to spring it on her first. Preston's voice on my phone at 7 a.m. carried the weight of finality. The judge signed the order. We have everything now. I'd spent a sleepless night replaying Robert's revelation. Marlene had discredited Sterling before he disappeared. The same playbook. But this time, I saw it coming. Judge Morrison reviewed Diana's evidence package, Preston continued. Granted our emergency petition in full. Wayne Colton's insurance company has to release all trust documents, policy records, and internal communications by end of business today. What do the documents show? I asked. Get to my office. You need to see this person. An hour later. I sat in Preston's conference room, surrounded by documents proving my wife had been planning to kill me for years. Marlene wasn't just a beneficiary, Preston said, spreading files across the table. She was listed as co-insured on policies you never knew existed. She took out 3 separate life insurance policies on you, different companies, different years. Total value $2.3 million. My hands went still. I never signed any life insurance applications. She forged your signature. Preston pulled out forms, each bearing my name in handwriting close enough to pass inspection. Wayne's company issued 2 of them. Rubber stamped the applications without verification. The third came from a company where Wayne's college roommate is regional director. $2.3 million in death benefits. On me. Without my knowledge. Look at the dates, Preston continued. First policy, August 2019. Same month she changed your beneficiary structure. 2nd October 2019, right after the trust was established. 3rd January 2020, 1 month before Sterling's accident. The timeline was a countdown. When I didn't die naturally, they'd pivoted to Sterling. This is attempted murder, I said. This is provable conspiracy to commit insurance fraud and murder, Preston corrected. The forgery alone is a felony. Combined with Diana's evidence, we have enough for criminal prosecution. A knock at the door interrupted us. Preston's assistant showed in a man in his mid-40s, wearing a sport coat and carrying a worn leather briefcase. Clifford Harlan, this is Detective James Crawford, Preston said. LAPD Fraud Division. Detective Crawford had the careful eyes of someone who'd seen every con. He shook my hand, then settled into a chair and opened his briefcase. I've reviewed the evidence package, Crawford said. This is one of the most comprehensive fraud cases I've seen. The paper trail is airtight. Will you arrest her? I asked. We'll do better than that, Crawford said. Mr. Lockwood proposed a controlled confrontation. Family meeting tomorrow morning, where you present the evidence before we take her into custody. Gives her a chance to confess, cooperate, possibly reduce charges. You think she'll confess? Probably not, Crawford said honestly. But it's proper procedure. Detective Crawford's handshake was firm. The touch of justice arriving too late to prevent 40 years of theft, but just in time to end it. Preston spread a timeline across the table. Here's how tomorrow works. Asset freeze filing goes through at 9 a.m. By 9:01, Marlene can't touch a single account. At 10 a.m., you confront her at your residence with the evidence. Detective Crawford and 2 uniformed officers arrive at 10:30 to make the arrest. "And Wayne Colton?" I asked. "Separate team hits his office at the same time," Crawford said. "Coordinated arrests. We don't want either of them warning the other." The logistics were precise, mechanical. Tomorrow morning, my 40-year marriage would end in handcuffs. "Clifford, you'll confront her at 10 a.m., Preston said. "Give her a chance to confess before police arrive. Detective Crawford will be monitoring from outside. If anything goes wrong, he's 30 seconds away." "What could go wrong?" "She could run, destroy evidence, become violent," Crawford said. "We'll have the house surrounded, but there's always risk." I thought of Marlene that morning, asking if I wanted eggs. The careful performance while she spread rumors about my mental decline, while she prepared to finalize the house sale. "I can handle it," I said. Crawford made notes, asked questions about house layout, exit points, whether Marlene kept weapons, planning my wife's arrest like a tactical operation, because it was. After an hour, Crawford left to coordinate with his team. The conference room felt very quiet. "There's one more thing," Preston said. Something in his tone made me look up. Diana traced that phone number from Marlene's bills, not the blocked number, a different one. Outgoing calls from Marlene to a Seattle area code. Dozens of them, starting 6 months after Sterling disappeared. My heart stopped. Seattle. Diana tracked the number to an apartment in Belltown. Preston continued. "Knocked on the door 3 days ago. Sterling answered." The conference room tilted. I gripped the table edge. "He's alive!" My voice cracked. Alive. Healthy. Working as an architectural consultant under a different name. Diana showed him the evidence, told him what we've uncovered. Preston paused. "How do you feel when you learn your son is alive, healthy, and about to help send his mother to prison?" "He's agreed to appear at your house tomorrow morning. He'll testify against Marlene about everything: the construction accident, her maintaining contact with him, her instructions to stay hidden. Your son is coming home, Clifford, to help put his mother in prison." I couldn't speak. Sterling was alive. 5 years of grief, and he'd been in Seattle the entire time. Talking to Marlene, following her instructions. "Why didn't he come home?" I managed. "You'll have to ask him that tomorrow," Preston said gently. "But Diana says he's ready to tell the truth. All of it." Preston closed the file folder, 40 years of conspiracy compressed into documented proof. "Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Marlene will walk into what she thinks is a normal morning, and by 10:30 she'll be in handcuffs. Sterling will be there to face her. Wayne Colton will be arrested at his office. And you," he met my eyes, "you'll have to watch your son testify against the woman who gave birth to him. Tried to kill him, then pretended to grieve him while knowing exactly where he was." His voice dropped. "Are you ready for that? Because there's no going back after tomorrow." The sound of Marlene's key in the front door at exactly 10 a.m. was the beginning of the end of 40 years of lies. I'd answered Preston's question the only way I could. "Yes, I'm ready." But sitting in my living room at 9:55 a.m. with Preston on one side and Detective Crawford on the other, evidence folders spread across the coffee table, I wasn't sure that was true. When she walks in, "Let her see us first," Preston said quietly. "Let the shock register before you say anything." Detective Crawford adjusted his position, his badge visible on his belt. "Mr. Harlan, once you present the evidence, I'll take over. This becomes official police business." Outside, uniformed officers were positioned at both exits. Wayne Colton's arrest team was standing by. The asset freeze had gone into effect at 9 a.m., every account locked. Marlene couldn't access a penny. She just didn't know it yet. My phone showed her text from this morning. "Perfect. I'll bring champagne. Time to celebrate our new beginning." The key turned in the lock. Marlene's heels clicked across the entryway. She was humming something cheerful. I heard the rustle of a shopping bag, the clink of a bottle.
"Clifford," she called.
"I got the good champagne. The papers just need our signatures," and she rounded the corner carrying Dom Perignon in a leather folder. Her smile was radiant, triumphant. Then she saw Preston, saw Detective Crawford, saw the files on the table. I watched my wife's smile die in real time, confusion bleeding into the first flickers of fear.
"Preston."
The champagne bottle tilted in her grip. "What are you doing here? I thought this was just a quick signing." "Sit down, Marlene," I said. "We need to talk about some documents before you sign anything." Her eyes darted between us. "Who is this? What's going on?" "This is Detective Crawford," I said. "LAPD Fraud Division. Sit down." "I don't understand. If this is about the house sale, it's about insurance fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit murder," Preston said. "Sit down. Mrs. Harlan?" The champagne bottle slipped from her fingers, hitting the carpet without breaking. Marlene sank onto the sofa, her face draining of color. "I don't know what you think," she started. I slid the first folder across the table. Sterling's construction site photos spilled out 8x10 glossy prints showing the crane assembly, safety violations, and Wayne Colton's face clearly visible. "Sterling took these photos 5 years ago," I said. "The day of his accident. Do you recognize the man standing by the crane?" Marlene's hand trembled as she picked up the first photo. I don't know what you're talking about." "That's Wayne Colton," Preston said. "Also known as Victor Brennan. Your business partner, your lover. The man who investigated the accident he helped cause." "You're being ridiculous," Marlene said. But her voice cracked. "Wayne is just... He was the insurance investigator." "Is that why you had dinner with him 6 days ago at Miramar? Why you touched his face like you've been doing it for 40 years? Her eyes widened. "You had someone following me?" "Private investigator. She's been very thorough." Preston opened the second folder. Phone records, highlighted in yellow. 247 phone calls over 5 years to a Seattle number. "Do you know whose number that is?" 247 calls. 5 years. Every single one a lie. Marlene stared at the records, fear crystallizing into calculation. She was trying to figure out what we knew, what we could prove. "Sterling's number," I said, my voice shaking. "You've been calling him, talking to him, while I thought he was dead or missing, while I blamed myself." "You don't understand," Marlene said quickly. "Sterling asked me not to tell you. He needed space. He needed space from you trying to kill him." The words exploded out. "You let me grieve for 5 years. You watched me break down at Christmas, at his birthday, and you knew exactly where he was." "That's not Clifford." "Please." She called him twice a month. Preston said coldly, regular check-ins, making sure he stayed hidden, making sure he kept quiet about what really happened. Marlene's hands were shaking. "Where is he? Where's Sterling?" "You'll see him soon," I said. "But first, there's one more document." Preston placed the final folder on the table and opened it with deliberate precision. The insurance trust. Marlene's signature clear at the bottom next to Wayne Colton's. The document sat between us like a bomb with her signature on the detonator. "This is the insurance trust you established with Wayne Colton," Preston said, dated October 15, 2019. 4 months before Sterling's crane collapsed. Marlene stared at the date. Her face went completely white. That was just estate planning. It specifically covers construction site accidents." Preston continued. "You planned it. Marlene. You planned to hurt Sterling 4 months before it happened. You set up the financial structure. Then Wayne arranged the accident." Marlene's eyes darted to the door, to Detective Crawford's badge, back to me. Her breath came in short gasps. "Where is Wayne?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Not a denial, not an explanation, just, "Where is Wayne?" "Being arrested at his office," Detective Crawford said. "Right about now." Marlene's eyes locked on Crawford's badge, and I watched 40 years of calculated performance collapse into raw panic. "Where is Wayne?" she asked again, her voice breaking. "You need to understand it wasn't supposed to. Sterling wasn't supposed to survive." The words hung in the air, a confession she couldn't take back. Behind me, the front door opened quietly. A voice I hadn't heard in 5 years said, "Hello, Mom." My son stood in the doorway of our living room, older, scarred, alive, and I couldn't breathe. Sterling was 32 now, lean and weathered in a way that had nothing to do with age. A surgical scar ran along his left temple, pale against tan skin, disappearing into his hairline. He favored his left leg, his gait showing a pronounced limp as he stepped into the room. "Hi, Dad." His voice was rough, older than I remembered, carrying weight it hadn't held before. I stood without deciding to, my legs moving on instinct. "Sterling. God. Sterling." He crossed to me, and I pulled him into an embrace that 5 years of grief had been waiting for. He was solid, real, here. I felt his hands grip my shoulders, heard his breath catch. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Just for me. I'm so sorry. Dad." Over his shoulder, I saw Marlene rise from the couch, her face completely drained of color. She stared at Sterling's surgical scar, at the way he shifted weight off his left leg, at the permanent evidence of the accident. Sterling stepped back from me, turning to face her. "You look surprised to see me, Mom," he said. "But you've known where I was this whole time, haven't you?" Marlene's legs gave out. She sank back onto the sofa, one hand covering her mouth. "Sterling, your leg, your face." The crane crushed my hip. Sterling said, his voice level. "Fractured my skull. Took 3 surgeries to walk again. 8 months of physical therapy. I'll limp for the rest of my life." I watched my wife stare at our son's scars and finally understand the difference between theory and consequence. "No," Marlene whispered. "No, that wasn't. You weren't supposed to." "Supposed to what?" Sterling asked. "Survive or just be hurt badly enough to disappear?" Marlene's sobs began, her whole body shaking. Sterling reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded evidence bag. Through the clear plastic, I could see a twisted piece of metal, maybe 6 inches long, with what looked like a clean cut on one end and scorched metal on the other. "I knew it wasn't an accident," Sterling said, placing the bag on the coffee table. The crane's brake cable had been cut, then welded to look intact. "I found this piece after they cleared the site. Kept it for 5 years. Detective Crawford leaned forward, examining the evidence through the bag. "Why didn't you come forward with this 5 years ago?" Sterling's jaw tightened. "Because 3 days after the accident, my mother called me in the hospital. I was barely conscious, still had tubes in my chest. And she told me, if I valued my father's life, I'd disappear and never tell anyone what I suspected." The room went very quiet. She said Wayne Colton had friends. Sterling continued, that accidents could happen to anyone, that if I cared about Dad, I'd take the insurance settlement, move away, and forget what I'd seen. Sterling pulled a twisted piece of metal from his jacket pocket, the sabotaged brake mechanism he'd kept for 5 years. Marlene was sobbing now, words tumbling out between gasps for air. "I never wanted you hurt like this." Wayne said he'd arrange a small accident equipment failure. Nothing serious. You'd be scared. Maybe sue the contractor. Leave the business, that's all. Just leave. A crane dropped on me. "Mom." Sterling's voice stayed calm, but I heard the steel underneath. "I was in a coma for 6 days. Wayne went too far, Marlene cried. He was supposed to frighten you away from the money, not break you like this. I wanted you out of the inheritance picture, but I never wanted you dead, Sterling finished. Is that supposed to make it better?
You don't understand, Marlene said desperately. The plan was always about the money. Clifford was supposed to... We thought he'd... She couldn't finish. You thought I'd die first, I said. My voice sounded far away. The forged life insurance policies.
You were waiting for me to die naturally, collect the money, and disappear with Wayne. But I stayed healthy. So you needed Sterling out of the way before you could kill me.
Marlene's face crumpled.
Wayne said a minor scare. Equipment malfunction. You get spooked. Leave construction. Maybe move away. Then, when Clifford eventually passed, there'd be no complications with the inheritance. Clean. Simple. But Wayne had other plans. Preston said quietly. When I saw you in that hospital bed. Marlene sobbed, looking at Sterling. All those machines. Your head bandaged. I knew Wayne had gone beyond what we agreed, but I couldn't stop it then. I had to protect him. We'd come too far. You chose your lover over our son's life, I said. Marlene's hands shook violently. I wanted him away from the inheritance. Clifford, not dead, not broken, but Wayne. Wayne wanted him gone permanently. He told me after it was done. He said Sterling was too smart, would figure things out eventually. Better to eliminate the problem completely. How do you claim you never wanted your son hurt when you threatened his life if he talked to... So you threatened me to keep quiet, Sterling said. Protected Wayne. Let Dad grieve. Stayed in this house, pretending to be the devoted wife while planning to finish the job. I never meant for it to go this far, Marlene whispered. Detective Crawford stood, pulling handcuffs from his belt. Mrs. Harlan, whether you intended murder or just conspiracy to defraud, you're under arrest. Marlene looked up at him, mascara streaking her face. But there's one more thing you should know, Crawford continued. He nodded to Sterling. Your son has been working with us for 3 weeks. And this morning, when we arrested Wayne Colton at his office, he gave you up completely. Marlene's face went white. Said the whole 40-year plan was your idea, Crawford said, including the crane. He's claiming you ordered him to kill Sterling, and he has recordings to prove it. The courthouse steps felt like a different planet. Sunlight, news cameras, lawyers in expensive suits discussing my destroyed marriage like it was just another case number. Several weeks had passed since Marlene's arrest. Several weeks since Sterling walked back into my life. Weeks of depositions, evidence reviews, and watching my 40-year marriage get dissected in fluorescent-lit conference rooms. Preston's office had become my second home. Wayne's facing 15 to 25 years, Preston said, sliding the charging documents across his desk. Attempted murder, insurance fraud, conspiracy, forgery. The DA is going hard on this one. High-profile case, clear evidence, no chance of leniency. I scanned the list of charges. Each one carried years of prison time. And Marlene, she wants to negotiate. Her attorney is talking plea deal in exchange for testimony against Wayne. Preston pulled out another folder. The DA is willing to listen if she provides full cooperation on the financial structure and timeline. What's she offering? Everything. 40 years of records, bank accounts, communication with Wayne. The whole conspiracy. She's trying to minimize her sentence by burying him. 15 to 25 years. Wayne Colton would die in prison. There's something else, Preston continued. The recordings Wayne claimed proved Marlene ordered Sterling's murder. Forensic analysis shows they're fabricated. I looked up. Fabricated how? Clips from different phone calls edited together. Audio from conversations over several years spliced to sound like Marlene giving murder instructions. Forensic analysts found the digital seams different background noise, pitch variations, Compression artifacts. So he lied about her ordering Sterling killed? She was absolutely complicit in the conspiracy, Preston said carefully. The insurance trusts, the financial planning, the threat to Sterling in the hospital, all real. But Wayne escalated to attempted murder on his own, then tried to frame her for ordering it when he got caught. The truth was more complicated than either of their accusations. They'd both lied, both stolen, both destroyed lives. But Wayne had crossed into murder without Marlene's knowledge, then tried to pin it entirely on her. The DA wants you to hear testimony from a witness, Preston said. Someone who corroborates Sterling's story from before the accident. That afternoon, I sat in the district attorney's conference room while a woman in her early 40s gave her statement. Briar Whitfield had been Sterling's girlfriend 5 years ago, a freelance graphic designer he'd met through work. She had kind eyes and the careful composure of someone who'd thought about this moment for years. Sterling told me his mother was acting strange, Briar said, her voice steady. This was maybe 6 weeks before the accident. Secret phone calls, meetings with someone she called an old friend but wouldn't introduce to family. What else did he tell you? The assistant district attorney asked. Briar's testimony gave Sterling's 5-year silence a witness, someone who knew he'd suspected the truth all along. He said she kept asking about the construction business valuation, about inheritance laws. She wanted to know what would happen to assets if Clifford passed away. Sterling thought she was planning to leave him. Did Sterling ever suspect she was planning to harm him? Preston asked. Briar shook her head. No. He thought she was having an affair, maybe planning divorce. He was worried about you, Mr. Harlan, about you finding out and being devastated. Her voice caught. He never imagined she'd hurt him to get to the money. After Briar left, I sat in Preston's office staring at the wall. Sterling was trying to protect me, I said. Even then, he's a good man, Preston said quietly. Despite everything she put him through. A few days later, Preston called with news. Marlene's taken the deal. 8 years, eligible for parole in 5. She'll testify against Wayne, in detail, every conversation, every transaction, every plan they made. 8 years for 40 years of lies and nearly killing our son. The alternative was trial and possibly 20 years, Preston said. This guarantees conviction and she cooperates on asset recovery. We get the money back. Wayne goes away for life, and she admits guilt publicly. I thought about Marlene in a courtroom, standing before a judge, pleading guilty, admitting to the world what she'd done. It's not enough, I said. It never is. But it's justice. Clifford, imperfect but real. Was $340,000 restitution? Or just another manipulation? That evening, Preston called again. His voice carried a strange note I couldn't identify. There's one more thing. Marlene disclosed a hidden account Wayne didn't know about. $340,000 she moved in 2023. I sat forward. She was hiding money from him? Apparently. Set up a separate account. Transferred funds incrementally over 18 months. Wayne never knew it existed. Why is she telling us now? Because she's offering it to Sterling, Preston said. Says it's for his medical bills and what she put him through. Partial restitution for his injuries and the 5 years he lost. I didn't know what to say. Marlene had stolen from me, threatened our son, destroyed our family. And now she was offering blood money as penance. The asset freeze secured the remaining funds. Preston continued. $4.61 million in various accounts, after subtracting what Wayne had already moved offshore before the freeze took effect. Life insurance policies, investment accounts, the trust structures. All frozen, all recoverable. It's yours, Clifford. Everything she stole we're getting back. And she wants Sterling to have the hidden account. She says it's the least she can do. I think this sees times buy forgiveness, or maybe salve her conscience before prison. I thought of Sterling's limp, his surgical scar, the 5 years he'd spent in Seattle hiding because Marlene threatened my life. 20,000 couldn't give him back those years. Couldn't undo the trauma or heal the permanent damage, but maybe it could help him rebuild. Preston closed the asset recovery file. The number's final 4.1 million secured for me, 340,000 for Sterling. Wayne Colton facing life in prison. Marlene pleading guilty to 8 years. But as I left the courthouse that afternoon, Sterling was waiting on the steps. The question in his eyes wasn't about money or justice. It was about whether we could rebuild what 40 years of lies had destroyed, the relationship between a father and son who'd both been victims of the same woman. Floyd Ashford's front porch looked the same as it had 20 years ago when he was my construction foreman. But nothing else about this visit was familiar. I'd driven from the courthouse to San Gabriel Valley, following Sterling's directions, my hands tight on the wheel. Sterling had been staying here since resurfacing, giving us both space before attempting this conversation. Floyd opened the door before I could knock. 68 years old, gray-haired, but still built like the laborer he'd been for 40 years. We'd worked together on a dozen projects before he retired. "Good to see you, Cliff," Floyd said, gripping my hand. "Sterling's out back. I'll give you two some time alone." I found Sterling on the back patio, sitting in an old lawn chair with coffee. He stood when he saw me, favoring his left leg. "Thanks for coming, Dad," he said. "I know this is complicated." "I've been waiting 5 years to talk to you," I said, sitting down. "Really talk, not just wonder where you were." Sterling nodded, staring at his coffee. The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything unsaid. "Floyd knew," Sterling said finally, "where I was, the whole time. I made him promise not to tell you." I looked through the patio door where Floyd had disappeared. Floyd knew for 5 years I needed someone I could trust absolutely. Someone who'd been loyal to you for decades. Sterling's voice was steady. "After Mom threatened your life in the hospital, I knew I had to disappear. Floyd was the only person I could think of who'd keep the secret and wouldn't judge me for it. My most loyal employee had kept my son's secret for 5 years, and I couldn't even be angry about it. He wanted to tell you." Sterling continued. "Called me every few months, said it was killing him to watch you grieve. But I made him swear, if Mom suspected you knew where I was, she'd assume you'd talk, and you'd become a liability. So you protected me by staying away. I protected you by making her think she'd won." Sterling's jaw tightened. "I worked construction in Reno, different name, cash jobs, kept my head down and healed. 5 years in Nevada, working construction jobs while I thought he was dead or running from me. Every time Mom called, I reminded her I stay quiet. You leave Dad alone, it was a deal. The day Diana called and said Mom was selling the house, I knew the deal was broken. That's when you agreed to come back. Diana showed me the evidence, the insurance trusts, the forged policies, Wayne Colton's real identity. She said you'd figured it out, that you were building a case. I realized I didn't have to protect you anymore. You were protecting yourself." Sterling looked at me, and I saw my son older, scarred, but still the same person. "I'm sorry," I said, "for whatever I did that made you think you had to face this alone. You didn't do anything wrong. Dad, Mom did, Wayne did. I just got caught in it." We sat in silence, listening to birds in Floyd's backyard, distant traffic. "I want to work with you," Sterling said. "Learn the business, not the hands-on work my hip won't let me climb scaffolding anymore, but the planning, safety, management. You want to work construction after what happened?" "I've been thinking about construction site safety consulting," Sterling said. "Using what happened to me to help prevent accidents for other families. Making sure companies follow protocols. that equipment gets inspected properly, that workers know how to spot sabotage. You want to turn the worst thing that happened to you into something that helps people. I want to make sure no one else's mother can drop a crane on them and get away with it. Sterling's voice was hard. And I want to rebuild the Harlan name. Make it mean something good again. Pride swelled in my chest. My son had been crushed, threatened, forced into hiding, and his response was to help others. I'd be honored to work with you, I said. Sterling smiled. The first real smile I'd seen since he came back. There's something else, he said. I called Briar when I decided to come back. We've been talking every day for 3 weeks. Briar Whitfield, the girlfriend he'd had before the accident. When had I last imagined walking my son down an aisle to anything except a courtroom? We're getting married in October. Sterling continued. Small ceremony, just close friends and family. She's been patient with me, understanding about everything. She wants to help with the safety consulting business, handle the marketing and client relations. My throat tightened. Sterling, that's wonderful. I know this is asking a lot after everything, Sterling said, his voice catching. But would you walk me down the aisle? I couldn't speak for a moment. 5 years ago. I'd thought I'd never see my son again. Now he was asking me to walk him to his wedding. Yes, I managed. Of course, I'd be honored. Sterling pulled a business card from his jacket pocket, handing it to me. The print was crisp. Professional Harlan & Son Construction Safety Consulting, with both our names listed below. I ordered these yesterday, Sterling said. Too presumptuous. I stared at the card, at our names side by side. Father and son, rebuilding from the wreckage. Dad. I thought I'd never sit with you again and just talk about tomorrow, Sterling said quietly. But here we are, and tomorrow looks pretty good from here. I looked at my son, scarred and alive, planning a future I'd thought we'd lost forever. No, I said, my voice breaking. It's perfect. For the first time in 5 years. Maybe in 40 years. I could see tomorrow clearly, and it didn't include lies. Watching my son order coffee without looking over his shoulder was a small miracle I'd stopped believing in. Several months had passed since Marlene's sentencing. Sterling and I had fallen into a routine breakfast twice a week. Business planning sessions. Occasional evenings watching baseball and not talking about anything heavier than batting averages. This morning, I'd suggested Miramar. Sterling raised an eyebrow but didn't ask why until we were seated by the window overlooking the Pacific. This place has good coffee, he said. How'd you find it? I sat outside in a surveillance van once, watching your mother meet her lover here. I kept my voice light. Figured it was time to make better memories. Sterling looked up, then smiled. That's very healthy revenge movie of you, Dad. I prefer to think of it as therapeutic reclamation of emotional real estate. Whatever helps you sleep at night. The waiter brought coffee, took our orders. Through the window, morning sunlight turned the ocean gold. In this same room. Marlene had touched Wayne's face with 40 years of intimacy. Now I sat here with my son, reclaiming the space. October 14th, Sterling said, pulling out his phone to show me photos. Briar wants the ceremony at Huntington Gardens. Small gathering, maybe 40 people. Floyd's agreed to be best man. I looked at the venue photos. Classical gardens, elegant architecture. It's beautiful. Your mother won't be there. The words came out before I could stop them. We didn't mention her name, but her absence sat at the table like an uninvited guest we'd learned to ignore. No, Sterling said quietly. But you will be. That's what matters. 8 years in prison. Marlene would be 72 when she got out. Sterling would be 40. I'd be 77, if I lived that long. I want to walk you down that aisle, I said. Want to watch you marry someone who actually loves you. Briar's good people. Patient with my baggage. Sterling smiled. She's handling the business side of our consulting company. Turns out she's better at marketing than I am. Tell me about the business. Sterling's face lit up. Pacific Construction wants us to audit their downtown high-rise project. Comprehensive safety review equipment inspection. Protocol verification. Worker interviews. They're offering $15,000. You negotiated that. Learned from the best. Sterling pulled out a tablet, showing me the contract. 2 more companies have reached out. Word's spreading that we understand both the technical side and the human cost of cutting corners. Building a business with my son felt like pouring a foundation on solid ground after 40 years of building on sand. I watched Sterling review contract terms. His scarred temple catching the light, his coffee growing cold as he focused. He had my attention to detail. My insistence on doing things right. He just hadn't inherited his mother's talent for deception. Dad, you okay? I realized I'd been staring. Just thinking. I spent my whole life learning which materials decay from within. Wood rot. Foundation cracks. Structural damage you can't see from the outside. Took me until 69 to learn that skill applies to people too. Sterling set down his tablet. You couldn't have known. She was good at hiding it. I should have seen the signs. The secret phone calls. The sudden interest in estate planning. Pushing for you to increase insurance coverage. I was looking at the structure without examining the foundation. That's a very contractor way to process betrayal. It's the only way I know how. I took a sip of coffee. Every principle I taught you about construction applies to relationships. Measure twice, cut once. Never hide your mistakes, because they only get more expensive. And never build on unstable ground. You taught me those things when I was 8. I taught you about framing houses, didn't realize I was also teaching you about life. How do you measure the value of truth against the comfort of ignorance? Sterling reached across the table, his hand covering mine. Do you regret it? Exposing her? Everything that came after? I thought about the question. The surveillance, the evidence, the confrontation. Watching my wife led away in handcuffs. The divorce, the asset recovery. The endless depositions. Truth hurts, I said. God knows it hurt. But you can't build anything lasting on lies. Not houses, not businesses, not relationships. Eventually the foundation cracks and everything comes down. You always said that. When I was a kid, you'd point to badly built houses and explain why they'd fail. See that settling? Foundation's compromised. Give it 5 years, and the whole structure's unsafe. I was talking about construction. You were talking about everything. Sterling squeezed my hand. You taught me that integrity isn't optional, it's structural. Without it, nothing holds. Our food arrived. We ate in comfortable silence, watching the ocean. She called my lawyer last week, Sterling said finally. Wants to talk to me. Apologize, maybe. Are you going to? Not yet. Maybe not ever. He pushed his eggs around. I'm not ready to forgive her for what she did to you, what she tried to do to me. That's fair. Is it she's still my mother? And she still tried to have you killed for insurance money. I said gently. You don't owe her forgiveness on any timeline but your own. Sterling paid the check our new tradition. His way of saying he was standing on his own now. We walked out into June sunshine. The ocean breeze carrying salt air and summer's promise. 69 years old. Divorced, betrayed, but not broken. My son walked beside me without looking over his shoulder. Without fear. We had a wedding to plan and a business to build. And a future that didn't include anyone who'd ever lied to us. I spent 40 years learning to identify which materials rot from within. It took until age 69 to learn that same skill applies to people. Truth hurts, but foundations built on lies always collapse. And to you listening to my story, remember this. I spent 40 years looking at buildings, identifying which materials would rot from within. I could spot a compromised foundation from across a construction site, but I couldn't see the decay in my own marriage until it had nearly cost me my son. Don't make my mistake. Don't confuse longevity with integrity. Just because something has stood for decades doesn't mean the foundation is solid. Some might call this a revenge story, but it's not about vengeance. It's about truth. There was a reason it came out when it did. Not too early to destroy me, not too late to lose Sterling forever. Foundations built on lies will always collapse, no matter how carefully they're maintained. What looks stable on the surface can be rotting underneath. I learned to trust my instincts again, to value honest rubble over beautiful deception. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was living a lie? How did you rebuild afterward? Please share this with anyone who needs to hear that truth, while painful, is always worth pursuing. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe to the channel. Each one carries a lesson I hope will stay with you. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time matters to me. One final note. While this story contains fictionalized elements for depth and reflection, the message at its heart is real. Trust your instincts. Question what doesn't feel right. And remember, you can't build anything lasting